Amen. Isaiah 47. My read 1 through 5.
Go down and sit in the dust, virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, daughter of Chaldea, for you will no longer be called pampered and spoiled. Take millstones and grind meal, remove your veil, strip off your skirt, bare your thigh, wade through the streams. Your nakedness will be uncovered and your shame will be exposed. I will take vengeance, and I will spare no one. The Holy One of Israel is our Redeemer. Yahweh of hosts is his name. Daughter of Chaldea, sit in silence and go into darkness, for you will no longer be called mistress of kingdoms.
Okay. God used Babylon to discipline Israel. Now, how'd that work?
Well, they're gone. I was just saying.
Then he turns around and does this to them. So what's going on here? What were you going to say, Doug?
I was gonna say, well, they're, they were gone. They were taken from Israel, and they're sitting there missing, what they had, and they are calling out to the Lord, which they should have been calling out to him in the first place before they were taken off.
Okay. Now, remember the first time when the king of Assyria was there, and what was it? King Hezekiah? What was the king?
I think it is.
Was it Hezekiah?
I think so.
Huh?
I think it is that.
That sounds right.
Okay. Anyway, he repented, and he had the prophet to make sacrifices for him, and the army just packed up and left. No battle. They didn't have to shoot an arrow. They just packed up and left. Okay. Then he dies. Remember, he dies, and he gets all upset because he's about to die. And the Lord says, "I'll give you 15 more years."
Mm-hmm.
And so he says, "Oh, great, okay." So he lives 15 more years, and his son takes over. Well, his son doesn't follow after the Lord, and God lets Babylon come in. He drops the angelic guard around Jerusalem and around Israel, and he lets the enemy come in. Now, it's not like God went to the king of Babylon and said, "Hey, I want you to go down and I want you to make them sorry." But if we abandon God, if we turn our back and walk away from God, then we don't have any claim on his promises. Now, if we're obedient to God and we do our best to honor him and to worship him and to show him our love, then he has promised 7,000 things in the Bible. But if we turn our back on him and walk away and say, "We want nothing to do with you," then he shrugs his shoulders and said, "Good luck." I put that in. That's basically what happened. He said, "Okay, that's the way you want to go? That's the way it's going." Then Babylon comes in. Now, he's not disciplining Babylon for coming in and taking them away, but he's disciplining them on the way that they did it because it was very inhumane. They raped their daughters, they worked people to death without food or water. They died on the way from Jerusalem to Babylon. It was horrendous the way they treated them. And he is bringing vengeance upon Babylon because they overdid it. They took advantage of it. They took them away. And if they would have come in and said, "Okay, you have to pay tribute to us," and had treated people humanely, would have been a totally different story. Now, let's go back and look at Egypt. For 400 years, the children of Israel prospered in Egypt. For 400 years. When did God get upset? When they started making slaves out of them, started making them make bricks and build their cities. They became the slaves of Egypt. And the Egyptians basically did nothing. They just let the millions of Israelis do all the work, and they sat around in their luxurious homes, and they profited by it. At that point, God said, okay, it's time for you to get out of here. Pharaoh said no, and then God brought vengeance on Pharaoh. God doesn't bring vengeance upon people for living their lives. He brings vengeance upon people for abuse. Okay, if you go to Romans 12:19, what's it say? It says, "Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord." Why is that the best way to go?
For your
Number
own
one,
health.
I don't have to toss and turn and worry about it.
I was just saying, for your own health.
Huh?
For your own health.
For your own health. Your own health. And so you can stay out of jail, because if if I was to take vengeance on some people who have done things to me, and especially my children, I probably wouldn't be teaching you today. I'd be teaching a Sunday school class in some jail someplace, because I would overdo it. Once I got started, it wouldn't be pretty. And I probably wouldn't know where to stop. When God does these actions that He does them because they're just and justice. He does them because they're right. And He stops when it's appropriate. If this king would have repented in the middle of it, God would have backed off. But look at his arrogance. Well, we're going to deal with his arrogance here. Babylon, number 1, in 1 through 3a, was going to be humiliated. They wouldn't even have grain to mill. They would, look at some of the things it says. Sit in the dust. They were not going to be in their palaces, sitting in their fancy homes anymore. Virgin daughter of Babylon, sit on the ground without a throne. Daughter of Babylon, no more will you be called tender or delicate. Take millstones and grind flour. Take off your veil. They had become women of luxury. They were using the Israelis for cooks and to clean their houses, and we're not giving them anything in return. Lift up your skirts, bare your legs. What would that indicate they're doing? Tramping out their own wine. Okay? Got that picture in your head? You know, they would tie up their skirts so they wouldn't get stained and then trample out their own wine. The women of Babylon were not going to have that done for them anymore. And wade through the streams. Your nakedness will be exposed. Your shame uncovered. I will take vengeance. I will spare none of you. Not one. And the second thing, in verse 3b through 5, God guarantees it. He says, you went too far, you wouldn't listen. I'm going to take vengeance on behalf of my people. All right, somebody read 6 to 8.
I was angry with my people and disgraded my inheritance. I gave them into your hands, and you showed them no mercy. Even on the aged, you laid a very heavy yoke. You said, I am forever the eternal queen, but you did not consider these things or reflect on what might happen. Now then, listen, you lover of pleasure, lounging in your security and saying to yourself, I am, and there is no besides me. I will never be a widow or suffer the loss of children.
Okay. So, what are the sins of the oppressors? Number 1, severe abuse. Verse 6. Verse 6 says, I was angry with my people, and I desecrated my inheritance. I gave them into your hand, and you showed them no mercy. You know, it's one thing to discipline your children, it's another thing to show no mercy. When they repent, when they back off, when they get the message, then it's time for us to show them love. Well, the Babylonians showed them no mercy. Number 7, they boasted of their prosperity and power. What kind of power do I have over a slave? Is that power to brag about? Is that productive power to create something, to create a vaccine, to develop a car engine that'll get 500 miles to the gallon? Is that the kind of power we're talking about here, or is this abusive power, power to control, power to manipulate, power to use a person for my own benefit? They were boasting of their prosperity because they had all this free labor. They could do all this stuff, and it didn't cost them a dime. They could build their cities, and they wouldn't have to pay the laborers anything. And when they, did you ever see the movie, old movie with Charlton Heston and whatever? And they're building one of these pyramids, these big buildings, and they're rolling this big stone around on
Moses.
Huh?
Moses.
Okay. And this worker gets his robe caught underneath, and he rolled it right over him and kept on going and threw him in the side ditch.
10 Commandments.
That's
yeah.
the kind of thing, huh?
And the 10 Commandments was the name of the movie.
Was it Ten Commandments? Yeah, it was. He played Moses. It was the
Played
10
Moses,
Commandments.
the 10
Yeah.
Commandments, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you remember the scene.
Mm-hmm.
That's what was going on here. That's the thing that they were doing. Their lives were worth nothing. They used them, abused them, and then they threw them in the side ditch when they were dead. And boasted about it, boasted about their prosperity and their wonderful life at the expense of other people. One of the most grievous things that we can do in this life is to take advantage of a widow or an orphan. You had better not do that. They had better not suffer at our expense or at our neglect. Because if they do, God's blessing will be diminished in their life. You don't do that. That's one of the most grievous things God talks about in the Bible. 8a, their resulting carnal life. Remember that old saying? Idle hands are the devil's workshop. True or false? Look at America. Late 1800s. Everybody worked from sunrise to sunset. They put in their crops. They had to harvest them by hand. They had to go out with a scythe and get their wheat. Now we got all these fancy machines. And I used to remember my grandpa would say, I need to get the corn in by Thanksgiving. Now they go in the field sometime in September and they're out before October. And they got these $250,000 tractors and these big machines. Now, I don't wish they didn't have them. But the bottom line is, the easier our life gets, the fatter we get, the more idle we become, and then we begin to let that be our God, that be our life. You know, God said, 6 days you shall work, and 1 you shall rest. Now in a lot of industry, we have 4-day work weeks. And
How Wait, I work Fridays.
What about Monday?
Well, you get the point. The more leisure time we have, the more prosperous we become, the more evil we become. Now, not every single person is that way, but look at the world around us. Look at the way things are going in a lot of different places. We need to be careful that our prosperity doesn't become our God and that we begin to neglect our responsibility, because the original commandment is still in force. We are to maintain the world, and we are to be in charge of the garden. It's still our responsibility to maintain this planet. That has not been wiped out yet. And we are supposed to be doing it as God would have it done. Not raping the earth and stripping every tree off the side of the mountain and causing erosion. Not putting profit first in everything. That's not how we're supposed to be maintaining this planet. And 8b speaks of their arrogance. They boasted about it. They said, look at us. Is there anything greater than Babylon? Have you ever read or seen any pictures about the hanging gardens of Babylon?
Yes.
Well, part of that was brought about by the suffering of their slaves. Matter of fact, most of that was brought about by the suffering of their slaves. All right, somebody read 9 to 11.
Both of these will overtake you in a moment on a single day. Loss of children and widowhood. They will come upon you in full measure, in spite of your many sorceries and all your potent spells. You have trusted in your wickedness and have said, no one sees me. Your wisdom and knowledge misled you when you say to yourself, I am, and there is none beside me. Disaster will come upon you, and you will not know how to conjure it away. A calamity will fall upon you, and that you cannot ward off with ransom. A catastrophe you cannot foresee will suddenly come upon you.
All right. First thing that will happen, the entire social structure will be torn down. And that will affect, for the most part, the loss of the family. Look what it says in 9. It says, both of these will overtake you in a moment, in a single day, the loss of children and widowhood. Okay? There's going to be a whole bunch of widows, and in that day and age, the woman depended upon the man. The woman couldn't own property, the woman was totally dependent. And even in Israel, if your husband died, his brother was supposed to take you and provide for you, because the family structure was the only thing that the woman had in that day and age. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not an anti-feminist. But the bottom line is that's the way it was. And a woman without a father or a brother or the brother of her husband was literally living on the street, starving to death. That's the way it was. Now, God provided a structure that if that woman became a widow, it would be taken care of. And if there weren't relatives who could take her in, then she could go to the temple and she could basically say, I want to be married to God. I want him to be my husband. I will be his wife. And she could live at the temple, have food to eat, and help maintain the temple. But nobody got a welfare check. You didn't work, you didn't eat. So if she pledged herself to the temple and basically married God, remember we dealt with that in 2 Timothy, when we did 2 Timothy. If she went to the temple and said, I basically want to marry God, she became God's wife, and for the rest of her life the temple took care of her. But she worked every day. She polished she washed the windows, she swept the floor, she made the bread, the show bread for the worship. She was busy, maintaining the worship structure in the temple. And it was overseen by the priests in the temple. And they didn't abuse her, but they did provide for her, but she was expected to work. And her and her children would be fine. Okay, so the family structure was lost, there was a whole bunch of widows, and a lot of children died as a response to it. What would you rather do? Die in battle, defending your family, or watch your children starve?
Battle. Battle.
Battle. Yes. You know, for me to be hungry is one thing, for my granddaughter to be hungry is something totally. I cook a lot. You probably have figured that out. I cook a lot, but when I go to Indianapolis and we're up there for 2 or 3 days, I get up at 6 o'clock every morning and I fix them breakfast just like I fix you breakfast. And they love it. And I love it. It's different when I'm at home and I fix myself breakfast. When I'm up there fixing breakfast, there's a reward to it that cannot be described. Grandkids are great.
Yep.
Kids, they're great on most days. But then they become teenagers. And then they become know-it-alls. And then all of a sudden they become totally dependent again. Grandkids. And when you're done with it, you can get in your car and go home.
Oh, yes.
Verse 10. The exposer of your arrogance, arrogant worthlessness. Okay. Arrogance is worthless. Who is the only person that benefits by arrogance?
Yourself.
Huh?
Yourself?
Me. Me. Arrogance produces nothing. Arrogance does not generate a paycheck. Arrogance does not grow the garden. Arrogant people don't go out and get down on their knees and get dirty in the garden. They don't do it. They try to hire me to do it. Or you do. The arrogant people are arrogance is worthless. It generates nothing. And in the end, how many friends will an arrogant person have? Who likes to be around an arrogant person? And when I said arrogant person, what name would you put to it? Every one of you had a name, didn't you? I don't want to know what they are. Don't tell me. But the bottom line is we all know arrogant people. And how much time do you spend with them? I know you have to go to the family things. We had, there is one in Janice's family. And he's dead now, and the world's better. No, he's totally abusive to Janice's sister, and I had to stay away from him. I had to stay away from this man because he was about to deserve everything I was about to do to him. Because Cecil, her Janice's sister, she's just a wonderful person, and he just abused her in every way that he possibly could. And Janice used to say, "Don't get close to me." Well, I was sitting there, and one of my brother-in-laws was kind of a politically correct person. He worked for Standard Oil, and his job was to bribe politicians.
Oh, boy.
Basically, and he'd tell you that, oh, my job's to bribe politicians. What do they call those guys? Lobbyists. Lobbyists. He was basically a lobbyist for Standard Oil. So we're sitting there, and Russ was over there in the corner all by himself, and Rick looked at me and he said, don't you think we ought to go over and talk to Russ for a while? I said, no. He looked at me, he said, seriously? I said, no. He abuses that woman, and somebody ought to take him out behind the barn and horse whip him. And I'm not gonna go over there and pretend that I like him or that he's worth a nickel. And Rick sat there for a second, he said, okay. Wouldn't have worked. Worked. Arrogance generates worthlessness. Okay, 11. And we're out of here. 11, the exposure of your God's worthlessness. God was going to bring down the gods of Babylon and show the world how worthless they were. And we see that in 11. Their god Drago, they found him face down. They put the Ark of the Covenant in with Drago at one point in biblical history. And Drago was laying on his face, and the Ark of the Covenant was sitting there just shining as new money. So they set Drago back up. Next day, Drago's laying on his face, and the Ark of the Covenant's sitting there happy as he can be. And God and the plagues of Egypt, they all represented one of the Egyptian gods. And the frogs and the gnats and all that, and the Nile River turning to blood, God showed the Egyptians how worthless the Egyptian gods were and how dominant he was over them. And he's going to do that to Babylon right here. Okay, we'll start with 4, we'll finish that up and move on next week.